of New York City, from Manhattan's financial district to the beach communities of outer Queens, suddenly found themselves submerged beneath a filthy, freezing tide. It was more than any of the planners, architects, or civil engineers responsible for the city's form had ever anticipated. And in the end, it was more than the infrastructures they devised could withstand. Failure cascaded through a tight mesh of systems critical to the life of the city that, on any ordinary day, ran quietly in the background. Power, fuel, transportation, and communication networks all went down, despite the backups and failovers that had been so carefully designed into them. In the worst-hit neighborhoods, they stayed down for weeks. In New York City alone, tens of thousands of households found themselves without light, heat, or potable water. Elderly people and others with limited mobility were trapped on high floors in their thousands, marooned atop 20 and 30-story buildings, whose elevator service was not restored for a week or more. Entire housing projects were left to fend for themselves. The maintenance crews responsible for their upkeep and repair stranded off-site by the collapse of the regional transportation network. Attempts to restore service struggled against acute and immediate fuel shortages, amid lengthening lines and spreading mayhem at gas stations. And in true insult-to-injury style, there was barely time for anyone to internalize any of this before a vicious early cold snap settled onto the area. By the time my partner and I made our way back to New York, it was already clear that Sandy would turn out to be one of those events that rewrites the way we understand the world we live in. Like the 500-year floods or wildfires that now seem to strike every few months, the appearance of this storm suggested that the atmosphere had undergone a transition to a volatile new state, in which weather events of a magnitude once thought impossible were plainly now on the table, and those that had been considered exceptional would become routine. It was one of those moments of ruthless clarity, a meteorological disturbance so massive that it defied classification, difficult to attribute with any credibility to anything but human action, had landed on the very capital of empire. And in a matter of hours it had laid waste to all the intertwined systems that kept it functioning. Maybe it's simply that all of this happened to a place as comprehensively mediated and as endlessly, baroquely self-mythologizing as New York City. But at least for those of us who found ourselves living through its after-effects, Superstorm Sandy felt like some kind of rupture or punctuation in history. The advent of a new era in which the contours of everyday life everywhere on Earth would fundamentally be determined by the consequences of anthropogenic global heating. It will never be possible to point to a given day on the calendar and say, yes, that's when everything started to change. And in any event, I expect that moment would be different for each one of us. If you were forced to choose a single event, though, a single nodal point, at which one set of assumptions about how the future might unfold was replaced wholesale by another, you could do a whole lot worse than this one. Most of the ways in which Sandy reset our expectations about the world we live in were scary and hard to accept, but not all of them. If there was one bright light that kept burning amid the devastation, it was that there was in New York an organization able to stand up a logistical network and begin relief and recovery operations almost immediately. This organization had 2 distribution hubs set up before the last of Sandy's trailing winds had cleared the tri-state area. It funneled an enormous volume of donated goods and supplies out to the hardest-hit areas of the city. It furnished crew after crew of volunteers willing to take on the difficult, dirty, and occasionally dangerous job of site clearance. And it took on responsibility for providing thousands of displaced, traumatized New Yorkers with shelter, warmth, sustenance, and fellowship. The organization I'm talking about wasn't FEMA.